So, our next speaker is Dr. Sook-Kyung Lee. And Dr. Sook-Kyung Lee is the Senior Curator for International Art at the Tate Modern in London, as well as the Artistic Director of the 14th Gwangju Biennale. That's very exciting to me. I've had the privilege of being to several Gwangju Biennales, even though I haven't been able to make it to this one yet. But she's also been the curator and commissioner of the Korean Pavilion at the Venice Biennial in 2015 and has curated many major exhibitions at the Tate Modern and otherwise. So we'd love to welcome Dr. Sook-Kyung Lee to the virtual stage, as it were, and thank you very much for being with us today. Just a question, where are you today? Oh. Do we have sound?
You hear me?
Now we hear you.
Yes, I'm in London today.
For joining us at a distance.
Thank you so much for the organizers for the invitation. And also thank all of you for making the time to join the symposium today. My talk today will look at Nam June Paik and his connections with artists in South Korea and partly in Japan. Nam June Paik lived in many different places throughout his life, such as Seoul, Tokyo, Düsseldorf, and New York. He found friends and allies in these cities, getting inspired to develop his avant-garde tendencies and collaborative methods. His unique take on Eastern and Western philosophies and cultures in his technology-focused practice was enabled by the vision of a transnationally and technologically interconnected world. Paik's international trajectory was exceptional when traveling across borders was rare and difficult. The history of colonialism, war, immigration, and globalization collectively drove his movements across 3 continents of Asia, Europe, and North America, resulting in a hybrid practice that defied assumed characteristics of specific countries or cultures of origin. Envisioning the world as one entity, connected by media, information, and art, Paik navigated a global community of creators and viewers throughout his career. This talk looks at Paik's exchanges with artists in Seoul and Tokyo. Born in Seoul and educated at the University of Tokyo after fleeing the Korean War, these 2 cities offered a ground for his cultural and personal developments. Paik regularly visited Tokyo as his family home when he was studying in West Germany in the late 50s and early 60s. His visits continued even after his relocation to New York in 1964, and he became a host to many Japanese artists visiting or moving to New York ever since. Paik's connection with artists in Seoul was relatively indirect during the 60s and 70s, for his first visit since his flee was 1984. Many Korean artists were well informed of Paik's international practice, however, through Korean newspapers, Japanese art magazines, and personal contacts. His visit in 1984 was the beginning of his deepened and more frequent exchanges with the artist communities in Korea. During his studies in Germany, Paik wrote for the progressive Japanese music journal Ongaku Geijutsu, Music Art. For its October 1957 issue, he contributed an article titled The Bauhaus of Music, Attending Darmstadt's New Music Lectures. His second article on the course appeared in the December 1959 issue of the same journal under the title Serial, Coincidence, Space, etc. Darmstadt 1958, as you see here. Paik wrote in detail about John Cage's music, articulating the ideas of chance and indeterminacy, which also included some of Cage's graphic scores, as you see in this on the right side of the bottom page. Paik also contributed to the SAC Journal, a periodical published by the Soviet Art Center in Tokyo. The center was founded by artist and ikebana master Sofu Teshigahara in 1959 in a building designed by Kenzo Tange, and it organized numerous experimental concerts, exhibitions, performances, and events by both Japanese and international artists. Paik's contribution, titled For the New Ontology of Music, please read it with a magnifying glass, parts 1 and 2, were less of texts but visual poetry, appearing in the July and October issues in 1963. They featured a collage of newspaper articles, a crime chart, financial analysis, as well as the artist's short sentences on different types of music and their relationship with the audience. They were written part Japanese and part English, which was typical of Paik's writing. On 29 May 1964, Paik held a solo recital at the center as part of the Sogetsu Contemporary series, where he played his own action music like Homage à John Cage, Etude for Piano, Simple, as well as Lamonte Young's To Flint. The series featured many Japanese and international composers, including members of Sakyokuka Shudan Composers Group and Group Ongaku, Group Music, as well as Toshi Ichiyanagi, Yoko Ono, John Cage, and David Tudor, reflecting the center's very progressive artistic direction, as seen in the right side image of the 10th event. It was connected to the wider art world beyond music, as the concert by celebrated composers like Toru Takemitsu and Toshiro Mayuzumi resonated strongly with the aesthetics of chance and the everyday, advocated by Cage and Fluxus. Some members of Group Ongaku, such as Takeisa Kosugi and Yasunao Tone, soon participated in Fluxus. Paik, Ichiyanagi, and Ono had close links with international art scenes and played an important intermediary role in bringing together Japanese, European, and US artists and composers. Paik's collaborative attitude was also apparent in his participation in High Red Center's shelter plan that took place in January 1964. Founded by the artists Jiro Takamatsu, Genpei Akasegawa, and Natsuyuki Nakanishi, High Red Center organized several happenings and events in everyday places like trains, stations, and streets. For shelter plan, however, they rented an expensive suite at the Imperial Hotel, one of the prestigious international hotels in Tokyo, designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. Paik recalled, I quote, "Quietly, we tread the thick carpet and reach the most expensive suite. Here, 3 musketeers dressed in dark formals invite you to do many trivial, unimportant things. To hold water in your mouth and spit it out into a cup to see how large your mouth is. To measure your head movement while you try to stand still for 10 minutes. To take a bath and measure the capacity of your body, etc., and many other numerous things which you would be forced to do if you were under police arrest, unquote. Yoko Ono and several other fellow artists took part in the event, and its relics include a development plan for a personal shelter box, measurement records, and full body photographs for each participant. The fear associated with air raids, nuclear attacks, and the shelter as a feasible necessity was multi-layered in post-Hiroshima Japan. These serious yet absurd actions of the High Red Center highlighted the futile nature of protection when facing atrocities, while also avoiding direct political statements. Moving to Seoul, one direct contribution by Paik to an artistic event in Seoul was for the first Seoul International Music Festival at the National Theatre in September 1969. Paik sent a score titled Composition Sex on a Piano, which was performed by Chan Seung-jung and Myung-hee Cha, visual artists of the time. The score involved one male and one female performer, and they were asked to lie on top of a piano together, stimulating acts of sex. What the audience actually could see, as you see here, were two people's bare legs under a blanket and their clothes on a chair. But with the sound of their breathing and movements, it managed to manifest what the title proposed. Paik wrote in 1964, sex is very underdeveloped in classical music as opposed to literature and optical art. His collaboration with cellist Charlotte Moorman highlighted and questions the conventions of classical music in many ways, and Moorman's use of her own often naked body was at the center of their collaboration. In a concert in Philadelphia in 1964, Moorman premiered Paik's cello composition, Variations on a Theme by Saint-Saens. Making a direct reference to Camille Saint-Saens' cello movement, The Swan, Moorman dipped her entire body into a pool of water in oil barrels, after playing the original score quite diligently. Moorman's presentation of the composition was further developed in Paris in 1965, when she forgot to bring her formal concert dress and enrobed herself in translucent plastic drop cloth instead. Her nudity was a key element in subsequent collaborations with Paik, notably in the work Opera Sextronic in 1967. Comprised 4 arias, this provocative composition required Moorman perform in various stages of nudity and with several props, including electronic bikini and a decommissioned bomb. On its premiering night in New York, policemen raided the concert venue, and Moorman was arrested for indecent exposure. Moorman was convicted by the judge, paradoxically affirming Moorman and Paik's intent to disturb, excite, and challenge the unassuming audience. Paik later recalled that, I quote, Charlotte Moorman and the combination of classical music and nudity was the same thing. It was such a logical and surefire idea that I still wonder why nobody did it before us. After all, in 1965, there were many thousands of artists and performers who were frustrated and looking for a new breakthrough. The history of the world says that we don't win the games, but we change the rules of the games. We are like a mythical Greek bird who walked on the ground, and if she encountered a large hole, she took wing and flew over it, unquote. Paik's composition for the first Seoul International Music Festival had a similar consequence of being investigated by police, although no legal action followed, fortunately. the issue of nudity was serious, but not new to the circle of young artists in Korea at the time, because there had been other occasions it caused problems with media and police. Transparent Balloons and Nude was one such performance held in the popular music venue Sesibong in central Seoul on 30th of May in 1968. It was organized by Kang Ja-jung, Guk-jin Kang, Chan Seung-jung, and Sunny Shim, and is marked as the first performance in Korea where a woman's almost naked body took on central stage. There are a few different recollections of the performance, and it's quite partial now, but Jin Sang-yu's article on the 2nd of June 1968 in the daily newspaper Joseon-ilbo offers one detailed description. I quote, "Around 10 red rubber balloons are floating in the air, and some young people are filling up transparent balloons called modern balloons. A woman in underwear, the painter Kang Ja-jung, walks up to the stage and sits down on a chair. The young people attach the transparent balloons on her shoulders, arms, chest, and belly. In the process, the woman's top is cut by a knife and torn, exposing her upper body, and her underwear for the lower body is also stripped. The transparent balloons are continuously put on the woman with only her pants remaining. As if being submerged in giant soap bubbles, the woman's entire body is submerged in the transparent plastic balloons. Contemporary music like John Cage's is being played, and blue, red, and yellow lightings are present. Not only the members of the Union of Young Artists, but also the audience participated in the 1.5-hour event. Finally, the half-naked woman stands up and the producers burst the balloons wrapped around her body. The production ends, the woman walks away, and the artwork vanishes." Unquote. The artist Kang Ja-jung suffered most outcries from sensationalist journalists, conservative public, and the patriarchal society at large. The event itself was also historicized without acknowledging her significant role by artistic and academic communities, often recognizing only her male peers as proactive instigators. Jung, however, continued performing and participating in challenging and provocative happenings, despite not being considered as serious artist by many due to her association with nudity. The biggest personal sacrifice came in 1970 when her solo exhibition was cancelled by the authorities in the name of protecting ethics. Under recognition of women artists in collaborative practices are ongoing focus of the review of art historical narratives, and I look forward to learning further on the occasion of this symposium. The first Seoul International Music Festival was held at the time when the concept of collective activities based on a set of instructions was widely rooted and practiced by artists across different disciplines, including visual art, music, and performing arts. Korean artists at the time were informed of international art scene, aware of artistic movements and tendencies such as happenings, land art, as well as pop and pop art. They had keen interest in Paik's international career as well. Encouraged by frequent media coverage on his activities, including his collaboration with Moorman in Korean newspapers. For a short period between 1967 and 1970, Several performances were organized by young collectives in non-gallery public spaces, questioning artistic and social conventions. As the art historian John Key argued in her essay, Why Performance in Authoritarian Korea, which appeared in Tate Papers in spring 2015, these performances were interrelated with the political situation of the time. In an environment where civic liberties like the length of women's skirt and men's hair were closely monitored and regulated by the police, ideas like human rights and freedom of speech were rare indulgences. Even carefully arranged, non-aggressive, orderly performances faced severe interruptions and media outcries, especially if their actions took place in public spaces. With the increasingly repressive regime of the Yushin period that started in 1971 and lasted until 1979, when the dictator president was assassinated, any artistic attempts to question or perceived to resist the authority of the government were harshly and systematically suppressed. Many pioneering artists had to cease their experimental practice, and some of them, like Chan Seung-jung and Kang Ja-jung, even left Korea to find safer environment elsewhere. In an interview in 1974, Paik described Fluxus as his youth and innocence, emphasizing the anti-star and collaborative aspect of Fluxus. He valued the conscious internationalism of the movement, which rejected cultural nationalism in particular. He also explained that becoming Fluxus meant hiding or erasing oneself, demonstrating his persistent affiliation with a non-hierarchical and neo-Dada Fluxus sensibility. It can be argued that the withdrawal of authorial presence was the means of asserting the utopian ideal of collective creativity for Paik and his fellow Fluxus artists. The principle was perpetuated throughout Paik's career and shared by his contemporaries in such distant places like Seoul and Tokyo. Paik's exchange with the artistic communities in Seoul and Tokyo were also aligned with his vision for global interconnections. Paik's direction was predominantly anti-commercialist, as seen in his writing Global Groove and Video Common Market in 1970. He proposed the need for a video common market modeled after the European common market, arguing that this would strip the hierarchic video information through an inexpensive barter system or convenient free market. Paik developed a radical idea that the public television system was, by its nature, destined to be in the vanguard for a free exchange system. For him, communication across the globe was one of the most significant methods for deeper understanding of different cultures and societies, and eventually for a peaceful and harmonious world order. I quote, "If we could assemble a weekly television festival comprised of music and dance from every nation and disseminated freely by the proposed video common market to the world, its effect on education and entertainment would be phenomenal. Peace can be as exciting as a John Wayne war movie. The tired slogan of world peace will again become fresh and marketable," unquote. This vision was actively explored in Paik's satellite projects later. His first satellite project, Good Morning, Mr. Orwell, in 1984, was a revolutionary and ambitious attempt to simultaneously link transatlantic cities, as well as to juxtapose often contrasting elements of avant-garde art and popular culture. The unlikely associations of John Cage, Merce Cunningham, and Laurie Anderson with Sappho and Oingo Boingo were transmitted around the world from New York, San Francisco, and Paris via live satellite on New Year's Day, remarking George Orwell's critical vision of the future with a sense of irony and a joyful quirk. In a discussion after the project held at the Kitchen in New York that year, Paik emphasized his intention of achieving a simultaneous two-way broadcast that resembles a phone call. For him, satellite broadcasting was also the means of protecting and understanding minor cultures and revealing the difference and diversity of various cultures. According to Beck, I quote, satellite art in the superior sense does not merely transmit existing symphonies and operas to other planes. It must consider how to achieve a two-way connection between opposites of the earth, how to give a conversational structure to the art, how to master differences in time, how to play with improvisation, indeterminism, echoes, feedbacks, and empty spaces in the Cagean sense, and how to instantaneously manage the differences in culture, preconceptions, and common sense that exist between various nations. Satellite art must make the most of these elements so they can become strengths or weaknesses, creating a multi-temporal, multi-spatial symphony, unquote. His enthusiasm for the prospect of satellite communication for sharing between Western and Eastern cultures was the main motivation for his second live satellite project, Bye Bye Kipling. Commemorating the Asian Games in Seoul, Korea in 1986, Paik broadcasted around the world a live program of sport and avant-garde art from New York, Tokyo, and Seoul. Again, the juxtaposition of Lou Reed, Keith Haring, kabuki dancers, and a marathon race in progress was central to the conceptual structure of the project, creating a space opera variety show, as he termed it. Commenting on Rudyard Kipling's critical view of the balance of Eastern and Western cultures, this project, which with several technical glitches, also provoked debate on the benefit and risk of live broadcasting. 2 years later, Paik created his third and final satellite broadcast, Wrap Around the World. It connected Korea, the USA, Brazil, Austria, Germany, Ireland, Israel, Italy, the UK, China, and the USSR. The breach of the Iron Curtain was notable, as the Eastern Bloc was on the brink of radical political change. The increasing economic power of South Korea supported this ambitious project, which in turn commemorated the occasion of the 1988 Summer Olympics in Seoul. By then, Paik was a household name in Korea as one of the most successful and internationally renowned Korean artists. He also enjoyed continuing critical acclaim in Japan, with regular exhibitions both in public museums and private galleries throughout the 80s and the 90s. The impacts or effects of Paik's art in Korea are significant, both in the context of artistic practice, but also the public's perception of contemporary art. The proliferation of new media art in the younger generations of artists in Korea would be one particular example of such impact. as well as the acceptance and recognition of experimental avant-garde art in mainstream art system. As someone who grew up and watched the live broadcasting of 3 satellite projects in Seoul, I can also testify that the personal effect of understanding the world full of fascinating different cultures was very amazing. And more widely, Paik's satellite projects manifested a vision of art enjoyed by the masses simultaneously across the world.
Dr. Lee? Dr. Lee?
I'd like to conclude with Paik's concept of the electronic superhighway, which was also an articulation of an idea that how a tool of information and common values could resist hegemonies of geopolitical power. He once said, "I want to place culture out of nationalism and communication out of vanity and snobism." He continuously worked in transnational and interdisciplinary ways. He broadened his audiences from gallery goers to TV viewers, paving the way to reach online surfers and smartphone users to consume and produce endless image and video contents. His vision of a world intertwined without national borders or cultural hierarchies resonates strongly with our increasingly networked and digitally connected reality. And that really makes his work remarkably relevant today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Let's have a round of applause.